All right, let's not beat around the bush. Prince William has officially gone on an absolute behind-the-scenes rampage at Windsor, and the royal Richter scale is off the charts. We're not just talking about a minor family tiff here. We're talking about a full-blown, cold-blooded expulsion that has permanently shattered the illusion of royal unity. Freddie Parker Bowles, yes, Camilla's very own grandson, has just been permanently booted from the royal inner circle, and the sheer ruthlessness of how William executed this move will make your blood run cold. But here is the absolute kicker that the mainstream media is too terrified to report. Princess and saw the entire execution go down. She watched it unfold from a towering Windsor window, and her reaction? A slow, chilling, silent nod of absolute approval that sent shivers straight down the spines of the palace staff. This isn't just juicy family drama anymore, guys. This is a calculated, real-time constitutional reset. How did a spoiled teenager manage to push the future king entirely over the edge? What did he reveal about how this family actually operates when the cameras stop rolling? And how is Queen Camilla coping now that her ultimate play for family legitimacy has been brutally crushed? If you are ready for the absolute truth they don't want you to hear, hit that subscribe button on Crown Watch right now, because we are breaking down the darkest secrets behind the palace walls. Grab your popcorn, because we are diving straight into the absolute mess. To truly understand the sheer scale of the earthquake currently rattling the foundations of Windsor Castle, we first have to dissect the atmosphere of absolute, ice-cold calculation that Prince William has quietly established behind those ancient stone walls. For years, the public has been fed this carefully curated, polished image of a gentle, modern family man who smiles for the cameras, cuts ribbons, and plays the part of the dutiful heir. But behind the scenes, away from the flashing lights of the royal press pack, there is a completely different man operating in the shadows. This is a man who does not negotiate, does not offer second chances, and does not let sentimentality get in the way of the crown's survival. If King Charles represents the old way of doing things, a style of leadership defined by endless compromise, family diplomacy, and a desperate desire to keep everyone happy, William represents the terrifying dawn of a completely different era. He is running a highly efficient, corporate-style cleanup operation, and nobody, absolutely nobody, is safe from his radar. Before we even get to the absolute disaster that is Camilla's side of the family, we have to look at how William laid the groundwork for this new regime. You see, this entire purging process didn't start with a teenager who couldn't keep his mouth shut. It started with a far more prominent, far more dangerous liability to the institution of the monarchy, Prince Andrew. For months, Andrew had been aggressively lobbying behind closed doors, working every single residual connection he had left, trying to claw his way back into some semblance of official royal life. He wanted his military titles back, he wanted his patronages restored, and he wanted to be seen as a working member of the family once again. He thought he could wear down his brother, King Charles, through sheer persistence and emotional manipulation. And for a moment, it almost looked like Charles might soften. But William was watching from the sidelines, and he was not about to let his future kingdom be dragged down by a man who has shown zero genuine remorse for the reputational damage he inflicted on the family. According to whispers from deep within the palace household, William didn't shout, he didn't lose his temper, and he didn't cause a scene. Instead, he walked into his father's private office with a stack of files, sat down, and delivered a cold, undeniable ultimatum. He told Charles directly that the family had already given Andrew chance after chance, and that the bank of second chances was officially bankrupt. He watched in absolute silence as his father, visibly worn down, signed off on the final, absolute rejection of Andrew's requests. One senior aide who witnessed the aftermath of that meeting whispered that it was the exact moment she realized the true nature of the man who would one day wear the crown. William didn't blink, he didn't hesitate, and he didn't look back. He shut the door on his own uncle permanently, proving that to him, the survival of the institution always overrides the bonds of blood. Once Andrew was systematically dismantled and buried at the bottom of the royal hierarchy, William turned his sharp, unforgiving gaze toward a completely different corner of the estate, Queen Camilla's side of the family. For years, there's been a quiet, simmering tension beneath the surface regarding how much access Camilla's biological children and grandchildren should have to the perks of royal life. While they are technically not part of the royal family tree in a constitutional sense, Camilla has been quietly working behind the scenes to integrate them into the inner sanctum. She wanted her children, Tom and Laura, and their respective offspring to feel like they belonged to the grand tapestry of Windsor. But there was a massive conflict of interest brewing, driven by a deep-seated sense of entitlement that had been brewing for over a decade. At the very heart of this brewing conflict was Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's son, who has spent years dropping passive-aggressive complaints in public and private about how he is the Queen's son but gets absolutely nothing for it. Tom reportedly felt deeply frustrated that his mother's historic rise to the throne had not translated into official titles, security, or financial backing for his own lineage. Behind closed doors, Tom's rhetoric was far more aggressive than anything he dared to say to the press. He repeatedly told his son, Freddie Parker Bowles, that the royal family owed them everything they had. He joked, with a chilling edge of seriousness, that they should take whatever they could get, with force if necessary. This was the exact philosophy that Tom drilled into his teenage son's head. Do not wait to be invited. Do not ask for permission. Just demand your place at the table. Under his father's direct coaching, Freddie Parker Bowles began to make moves that immediately set off tripwires within Prince William's highly alert security apparatus. Camilla had been quietly pushing for Freddie to get a highly coveted, ceremonial seat at a prestigious regimental event, a privilege strictly reserved for working, high-ranking royals who have dedicated their lives to the service of the crown. Tom coached his son word for word on how to bypass the traditional channels, instructing him to raise the issue directly with senior household staff rather than waiting for an official invitation. The moment Freddie made that arrogant, unauthorized move, his name was flagged and sent straight to William's desk. William didn't react publicly, and he didn't warn Camilla. Instead, he simply assigned a trusted senior aide to keep an absolute 24/7 watch on Freddie's every movement, waiting for the inevitable mistake. And Freddie, completely blind to the fact that he was now walking through a minefield designed by the future king, made his first major blunder almost immediately. Just a few weeks after being put under surveillance, the young Parker Bowles sat down for an interview with a trendy, small-scale lifestyle magazine. It was supposed to be a harmless profile about his life as a young man in London, but under the influence of his father's coaching to build his own independent profile, Freddie began to speak far too freely. He casually mentioned details of a highly private, closed-door Windsor family dinner as if it were nothing more than a casual pub gathering. He went on to describe Prince William as a bit stiff, mockingly implying that he lacked the charisma to make a truly great king. Tom had helped him rehearse these very lines, believing that a little bit of provocative press coverage would make Freddie look rebellious and interesting. But at palace headquarters, the reaction was anything but amused. Within hours of the magazine hitting the stands, William's personal office had flagged every single word of the interview. This time, William didn't keep his thoughts private. He called his private secretary into his office, laid the article on the desk, and stated with absolute, flat authority that Freddie Parker Bowles was now officially a target to watch. To William, the immature insults about his personality didn't matter in the slightest. What mattered was the chilling realization that Freddie viewed the royal family as a personal piggy bank of social currency, something to be spent to boost his own public image, rather than an institution he had a duty to protect. If Freddie had stopped there, he might have survived with a harsh warning and a temporary ban from the guest list. But the toxic combination of teenage arrogance and his father's reckless advice pushed him into territory that William simply could not tolerate. Freddie began bragging to his schoolmates and friends in London about the highly sensitive, confidential information he claimed to have access to. He wanted to prove he was the ultimate insider, a boy who could whisper secrets from the very heart of the monarchy. And during one of these desperate attempts to look important, Freddie let slip a highly confidential, private medical detail regarding King Charles himself. Information that only a tiny, trusted circle of family members and physicians were supposed to know. The consequences of that loose-lipped boast were immediate and terrifying for the palace communications team. One of Freddie's classmates mentioned the medical detail to a parent who happened to have close connections to a prominent national journalist. The journalist, realizing they were sitting on an absolute bombshell, brought the information directly to the palace press office for comment. It took 2 full days of intense, high-stakes negotiation, subtle threats, and quiet backroom deals for the royal communications team to bury the story before it could explode into the national headlines. When the report of this near catastrophe landed on William's desk, the atmosphere in the room turned completely ice cold. This was no longer a case of a spoiled, annoying teenager making a fool of himself in a lifestyle magazine. This was a direct, active security threat to the reigning monarch. A boy with loose access to the family's most private spaces was now leaking medical secrets that could destabilize the crown if they ever reached the public domain. In William's mind, Freddie had crossed a line from which there was absolutely no return. He had officially transitioned from an embarrassing relative into a dangerous liability. William quietly began drafting the paperwork for an absolute, permanent freeze-out, waiting for the final, undeniable catalyst to drop the hammer. The silent machinery of Prince William's surveillance operation was already humming with lethal precision, and Freddie Parker Bowles had absolutely no idea that his digital footprint was being mapped out line by the palace security team. In the days following the near disaster with the king's medical leak, William did not show his hand. He sat in his private study, watching the data accumulate, waiting for the young man to deliver the final, undeniable nail in his own coffin. And Freddie, fueled by the intoxicating belief that his grandmother's crown made him completely untouchable, was more than happy to oblige. He began to treat his access to the royal estates as a personal plaything, bragging endlessly in WhatsApp group chats with his wealthy London friends about how Windsor was essentially his second house. The messages, which were quietly intercepted and compiled by the palace's internal security detail, painted a picture of staggering entitlement. Freddie joked about getting his friends past the gate security for exclusive polo events, boasting that all he had to do was drop Queen Camilla's name and the guards would practically bow. He even attempted to pressure junior palace staff into bending administrative rules for his friends, demanding special tours of the private apartments. When William read through these transcripts, his face remained entirely expressionless, but those close to him knew that this level of quietness was far more dangerous than any outburst of anger. What made his blood run cold was not just the arrogance of a teenager, but the realization that Freddie was merely a puppet repeating his father's deeply toxic ideology. Just a year prior, Tom Parker Bowles had been overheard at a high society dinner joking that the royal family ought to start charging wealthy foreigners for direct access to the inner circle. The apple had not fallen far from the tree. Freddie was merely operationalizing his father's mercenary philosophy. While this digital disaster was unfolding, Queen Camilla was not a passive observer. In fact, she had spent years quietly encouraging this very behavior, viewing her grandson's integration into the royal fabric as the ultimate validation of her own long, brutal struggle for social legitimacy. For decades, Camilla had fought a bitter war of public relations to transition from the most hated woman in Britain to the anointed queen consort. To her, seeing her own flesh and blood walking the halls of Windsor with absolute confidence was the ultimate proof that she had won. When Freddie had pushed for the ceremonial regimental seat, it was Camilla who had whispered in his ear, telling him to bypass the formal committees and demand what he wanted. She told him that was exactly how she had survived the early, hostile years inside the institution, by forcing her way into rooms where she was never wanted until her presence became an undeniable reality. She was handing him her personal playbook, completely unaware that William was rewriting the rules of the entire game. But the winds were shifting, and even Camilla's highly refined survival instincts began to pick up the drop in atmospheric pressure. A trusted lady in waiting, loyal to the Queen, had overheard William's private secretary discussing a systematic tidy-up of the royal guest lists for the upcoming seasons. Camilla immediately understood the subtext. Without making a scene, she quietly began to put a calculated distance between herself and Freddie in public, hoping that if her grandson was sidelined, she wouldn't be dragged down with him. She tried, just once, to gauge William's mindset during a tense, private family dinner at Sandringham. She brought up the topic of family unity, suggesting that keeping the Messier branches of the family close was often the safest way to monitor them. William, without looking up from his plate, delivered a single, devastating sentence. Family is not the same as liability. The sheer finality in his voice silenced the room, and Camilla did not dare press the matter further. Then, the absolute worst-case scenario materialized, transforming a Cold War dynamic into a localized nuclear strike on the family's peace. Freddie, during an alcohol-fueled private gathering at an elite London club, was recorded on a mobile phone by one of his own classmates. In the recording, which quickly spread through a web of exclusive group chats, Freddie launched into a vicious, highly personal attack on Catherine, the Princess of Wales. He mocked her public persona, laughing as he claimed she was merely playing dress-up as a future queen, mimicking her poised posture and calling her voice-coached, hollow, and entirely fake. He went on to tell his friends that once King Charles was gone, the real power would belong to those who knew how to manipulate the press, implying that the Middleton family was nothing but a middle-class operation designed to hijack the monarchy. The timing of this leaked recording could not have been more catastrophic. It surfaced online just 48 hours before William and Catherine were scheduled to lead a massive, highly publicized joint engagement designed to project a united, stable front for the monarchy. To William, this was no longer a security concern or an administrative annoyance. This was a direct, malicious attack on his wife, the future queen, and the mother of his children, coming from an ungrateful guest inside his own house. What made the betrayal completely unforgivable in William's eyes was the discovery that Camilla had actually been warned about the existence of the recording hours before it leaked to the wider public. Rather than coming forward and warning William, she had remained silent, desperately trying to find a way to delete the file before the future king found out. To William, that silence was a betrayal of the highest order, suggesting that Camilla was more interested in protecting her grandson's reputation than defending the woman who would one day hold her title. The reaction from the heir to the throne was swift, clinical, and completely devoid of emotion. The systematic freeze out of Freddie Parker Bowles began that very afternoon, executed not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet scratching of pens and the deletion of database entries. The first cut came when Freddie's name was silently struck from the guest list of a highly exclusive, private garden reception at Windsor. No phone call was placed to his parents. No official letter was sent. Freddie only discovered he had been blacklisted when a distant cousin casually asked him why his name was missing from the final security clearance document. Before he could even process the humiliation of this sudden snub, the second blow landed. An invitation to an intimate, weekend family gathering at Balmoral, which Freddie had already confirmed and placed on his calendar, was abruptly rescinded. A brief, cold note from a junior private secretary arrived at his London flat, informing him that the event had been reprofiled for administrative reasons and that his attendance was no longer required. The gathering, of course, went ahead exactly as scheduled, with every other member of the extended family present. Within 48 hours, Freddie found himself completely locked out of the secure digital portal used by the family to coordinate weekend stays and travel arrangements at Windsor. When he tried to log in to request a car for the weekend, his credentials returned a blank, chilling error message. Access denied. Terrified by the sudden, absolute silence from the palace, Freddie called his mother, begging her to find out what was happening. She had no answers for him, her own calls to the household staff being met with polite, icy stonewalling. Desperate, Freddie phoned his father. Tom Parker Bowles, far from being surprised, sounded incredibly bitter. He told his son that this was exactly how the Windsor machine operated when they wanted to destroy someone, by erasing them slowly until they ceased to exist. When Freddie, panicking, asked what he should do to fix the situation, Tom's voice hardened with a dangerous, reckless pride. He told his son that he had to fight back, to show them that the Parker Bowles family would not be quietly swept under the rug like a piece of unwanted trash. He told him to do what men do, implying that Freddie needed to assert his presence and force the royal family to look him in the eye. It was this disastrous piece of advice that drove Freddie to make his most fatal mistake yet. Rather than retreating into the shadows and waiting for the storm to pass, he decided to force a public confrontation. He traveled to Windsor during a high-profile, semi-private charity walk that the royal family was attending. He did not have security clearance, but he used his knowledge of the estate's outer perimeters to stand at the very edge of the crowd, waiting for William to walk past. When William's eyes swept over the crowd and landed on Freddie, the future king's face went entirely still, his eyes turning to chips of blue ice. Freddie had hoped for a reaction, perhaps a moment of public recognition that would force William to engage with him. Instead, he received something far worse: absolute, crushing invisibility. Not a single member of the royal family acknowledged his presence. The security detail quietly stepped in front of him, blocking his line of sight, while the family strolled past as if he were nothing but a ghost. Even his own grandmother, Queen Camilla, kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to look in his direction even for a fraction of a second. The sheer, public shame of the moment broke Freddie's resolve. He turned and fled the estate, his father's aggressive words ringing hollow in his ears. That night, he sent a frantic, furious text to an old-school friend, demanding to know what he had done to deserve being treated like a leper. But the silence that met his message was total. The trap had closed, and the final, permanent execution of his royal life was now only a matter of when, not if, William chose to strike. The tension within the stone walls of Windsor had reached an absolute, suffocating peak, and the final, irrevocable blow was about to be delivered with the clinical precision of a military strike. Freddie Parker Bowles, now entirely isolated and spiraling from the humiliating public rejection at the charity walk, was desperately searching for any way to reclaim his lost status. In his mind, he was still a member of the extended inner circle, a young man who deserved to walk the corridors of power. It was this delusional confidence, combined with a desperate need to prove to his wealthy London peers that he was not truly exiled, that led him to commit his final, fatal error. During a quiet family weekend at Windsor, where a small gathering was taking place in the private apartments, Freddie managed to bypass a secondary security checkpoint by using an old, unreturned keycard. Once inside a highly restricted hallway, he pulled out his phone and posted a series of brief, seemingly harmless Instagram stories. One of the photos was a blurry, artistic shot of a historic gallery, but in the background, a high-ranking member of the king's personal protection detail was clearly visible, along with a secure keypad lock leading to the private living quarters. Freddie deleted the post in less than 60 seconds, but the damage was already done. The palace security team, which had been monitoring his digital footprint with absolute vigilance, captured the screenshots within moments of them being uploaded. This was the golden opportunity Prince William had been waiting for. It was no longer about family gossip, teenage arrogance, or hurt feelings over a leaked recording. This was now a documented, active breach of royal security. In the hyper-vigilant post-2025 landscape of royal protection, exposing the faces of security personnel and the location of secure access points was an unpardonable sin. William did not hesitate. He did not consult with his father, King Charles, nor did he issue a formal warning through the press office. He bypassed the entire bureaucratic machinery of Buckingham Palace and ordered Freddie to be brought to a small, secluded sitting room on the ground floor of Windsor Castle. The room chosen for this final confrontation was small, minimalist, and deliberately domestic, the kind of space usually reserved for quiet afternoon tea, which only served to make the atmosphere feel infinitely more terrifying. There were no lawyers, no royal advisors, and no security guards standing by. William wanted no witnesses who could later leak accounts of his temper or claim that the confrontation had been an emotional, heat-of-the-moment outburst. Only 3 people occupied the space: Prince William, Queen Camilla, and a visibly shaking Freddie Parker Bowles. William stood by the fireplace, his posture perfectly straight and his hands clasped behind his back, looking every inch the cold, uncompromising sovereign he was destined to become. When William spoke, his voice was not raised. He did not yell, he did not throw papers, and he did not show a single ounce of anger. Instead, he spoke in a flat, quiet, monotone voice that delivered his words with the weight of an absolute judicial sentence. He looked directly at Freddie and told him that his association with the House of Windsor was finished. He stated that his access to every single royal estate, including Windsor, Sandringham, and Balmoral, was permanently revoked. Any future invitations to family events, public or private, were cancelled, and his name was to be completely erased from all official household lists, effective immediately. He used the word permanently twice, letting the heavy, brutal syllables hang in the silent room. Then, William stepped closer, his ice-blue eyes locking onto Freddie's pale face, and delivered the personal blow that shattered the teenager's remaining composure. "You do not get to mock my wife and call yourself family." Freddie's voice cracked as he panicked, looking desperately past William toward his grandmother, begging her with his eyes to intervene, to say something, to use her immense influence as queen to stop this nightmare. He asked her directly if this was her decision too. But Camilla sat in her armchair, completely frozen, her eyes cast downward toward her own hands. She knew that any attempt to defend her grandson would be viewed by William as an act of war against the future of the monarchy itself. Her silence was total, deafening, and absolute. William did not even give her the chance to speak, cutting off any potential response by stating that the decision had been made for the preservation of the institution and that the matter was officially closed. With a single, sharp nod from William, the meeting was over. Freddie was escorted out of the room, not by a friendly staff member, but by two grim-faced security officers who guided him toward the outer gates. After the door clicked shut, Camilla finally looked up, her voice trembling slightly as she told William she hoped he understood what he had just done to a young boy who had never asked to be born into the chaos of this family. William did not offer a defense, nor did he apologize. He simply gave her a single, polite nod of acknowledgement, a gesture that made it clear her grief was a calculated cost he had already accepted as the price of protecting the crown. The fallout of Freddie's permanent expulsion was felt immediately across the entire estate, but the most telling reaction came from a witness who had watched the entire departure from a distance. Princess Anne was residing at Windsor that weekend, and from her second-floor window, she watched as Freddie walked down the long, gravel driveway alone. There was no royal Bentley waiting for him, no palace driver to take him back to London, and no staff members carrying his bags. He was forced to wait by the security gate for a standard, local taxi to pick him up, looking like a complete stranger who had never belonged behind those historic gates. And stood perfectly still, her face an unreadable mask of duty and discipline, watching the vehicle carry the disgraced Parker Bowles away into oblivion. Days later, during a formal reception for a military charity, the topic of family dynamics and recent changes at Windsor was briefly mentioned in a quiet corner of the room. When a senior courtier made a subtle, coded reference to the new administrative measures regarding guest clearances, Princess Anne did not say a word. Instead, she gave a very slight, almost imperceptible nod of her head. To the untrained observer, it was nothing more than a polite gesture, but to the veteran staff members who had served the Princess Royal for decades, that nod was a highly significant, unmistakable sign of absolute, ironclad approval. To Anne, who had spent over 50 years sacrificing her own personal life, her privacy, and her own children's royal titles for the sake of the monarchy, William's ruthless action was not a display of cruelty. It was a long overdue, constitutional reset. She had watched the family nearly tear itself apart over the decades due to peripheral members treating their proximity to the throne as a license for personal gain, fame, and financial exploitation. She saw in William a leader who finally understood the brutal reality of the job, that the crown is not a family business designed to subsidize the lifestyles of extended relatives, but a sacred duty that demands absolute loyalty and sacrifice. That very evening, Anne placed a direct, private phone call to her nephew. Those close to the household whispered that her tone was warmer than it had been in years, filled with a deep, quiet pride. She told William that he had done exactly what needed to be done, and more importantly, that he had done it without flinching in the face of emotional pressure. William's response was brief, but the mutual understanding between the two most disciplined members of the family was solid. In that moment, a quiet alliance was forged between the present anchor of the family and its future king, sending a clear, chilling message to the rest of the household. With Freddie Parker Bowles permanently excised from the royal picture and Queen Camilla forced into a state of quiet, defensive submission, Prince William has officially drawn a line in the sand that will define his future reign. The era of royal hangers-on, media-hungry step-siblings, and entitled grandchildren utilizing the Windsor name for social climbing is officially over. Access to the inner sanctum is no longer a birthright for those on the periphery. It is a strict, highly monitored privilege that must be earned through absolute discretion, loyalty, and quiet service. Freddie was simply the first major casualty of this new, uncompromising era, a living warning to anyone else who might think they can exploit the crown for their own agenda. The message from Windsor is now loud and clear. The future king is watching, the rules have changed, and the gates are permanently closed to anyone who threatens the survival of the monarchy. This is the reality of the new, unforgiving royal order under Prince William. The era of playing nice, keeping up appearances, and tolerating toxic hangers-on is officially dead and buried. When the future king can systematically erase his own stepmother's family without a single flinch, it makes you wonder, who is next on his hit list? Are we about to see an even bigger purge as William prepares to seize ultimate control of the monarchy? Or has he permanently fractured his relationship with King Charles and Queen Camilla beyond any hope of repair? I want to hear your side of this incredible story. Did Freddie Parker Bowles get exactly what he deserved for crossing the line and mocking the future queen, or was William's cold-blooded exile way too harsh for a teenager's mistake? Is Princess and right to applaud this brutal new direction, or is the royal family losing its humanity? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this debate is about to absolutely explode. If you want to stay ahead of the game and get the raw, unfiltered truth about what is actually happening behind those high Windsor walls, make sure you smash that like button right now. Share this video with every single royal fan in your circle, and most importantly, hit subscribe on Crown Watch. We are digging up the secrets, breaking down the palace propaganda, and exposing the truths they are desperately trying to bury. Thank you for watching, keep your eyes on the throne, and we will see you in the next shocking expose.